Welcome to the Scottish Property Podcast. This is a show where we aim to educate, inspire and entertain through real life stories and interviews from people in the Scottish property community.
As always, thanks for listening and give us a follow on social media and subscribe to our YouTube channel. Remember to join us at our monthly networking events on the first Wednesday of every month. Tickets are available on our website. So without further ado, we'll just cut straight into this week's podcast. Welcome back to another episode of the Scottish Property Podcast. Delighted to have Davy Hutton back in the hot seat.
Oh,
Start again.
No, not starting again. No. Keep going, we're running with it.
Davy, it's great to see you again. We obviously got you back because of popular demand. A lot of people reaching out to us and saying that was a fantastic episode with Davy Hutton last time we had you on. So
Show
even
his personality, I think that's
even people that are no
That's
interest,
my next nervous.
pound shop celebrity.
even people that are no interest in property were watching the YouTube and commenting saying what a great guy. Could listen to you for hours, so I think that was good. And it's
Pin your
great.
ears back then. Have we got hours?
we've only got 45 minutes for this session because this podcast is all about our market updates. So, Stephen, every month
Every month, Nick, I come here and just get educated on what's been happening for the month previous. So don't expect me to contribute too much.
Mix it often, isn't he?
So just to, I mean, you did say last time that you're a bit of a news junkie, Davy. So we're hoping to get a bit of insight on what's happening in the macro economy. And I know none of us are economists sitting here, but we'll talk about things like interest rates and mortgages and stuff like that, where they're going, what you're seeing on the ground as well when you're going out and talking to, obviously, homeowners and people that are looking to sell their homes and stuff. But just to put things into context here for the listeners, this is Tuesday, 27th of June. And we're looking back, obviously, on the month of June. And we've picked out a few news articles and we're going to talk through the topics. But, you know, to kick it all off, really, the big thing that really happened in June was the announcement that inflation pretty much is not going anywhere. You know, they're not getting a handle on it. I think the figures were, the CPI figures that got released were 8.7%. which is basically flatlined from the previous month, which was 8.7%. Now, people think, well, that's not too bad. It's come down from over 10%. But the problem being, from what I'm reading, is, and again, I'm no expert, but the problem being is that
You're no expert, but you're like spouting figures like 8.7%.
I'm trying to look intelligent here, Davy. I'm trying to kid on that I know half.
It's easy to look intelligent in a podcast. You're not getting filmed.
I'm just reading this off.
We're getting filmed, are we?
I'm reading this off the computer. So the problem is core inflation, right, which strips out the kind of volatile things such as energy.
Everything that you might spend your money on.
Food
might go up.
Basically energy and food. So core inflation strips out that. That's gone from 6% up to 7%. So that's actually rising. Headline inflation's coming down. But the real problem is things like that. Plus the announcement that wages are going up as well, quite significantly. I think they've gone up 7%. That was the latest data. So all that is now ingrained into our problem, if you like, the inflation problem. So, you know, the headline is, how high will UK interest rates go?
Jesus,
They've gone
it's a bit of an intro, this, isn't it?
I'm going to let
40
you.
minutes, you said we've got.
I'm going to let you have your moment in a second. But obviously, it went from 4.5% was the base rate up to 5%. Is that going to be enough, Davy? Where do you see it going?
In all honesty, I think the whole thing's a shit show. I think, you know, I don't know the numbers as well as you do, but everybody knows inflation's going through the roof. The figures that you're talking about take out the things that people are actually having to spend their money on, like fuel and energy and food. You have to spend money on these things to go about your daily life. Why are they high? There's a variety of reasons. If you look into that a wee bit further, I'll bet you'll find somewhere that manufacturing inflation is next to nothing. So on one hand, you've got things going at 20%. I think eggs are up 33% in a year. But people that are actually making things, it's not going up at all. So why is it happening? And I did have a look at the first article that you sent me through there, which I think was a blog by somebody. And I think I kind of lost interest on it because it started off saying something like, those of you that say the Bank of England's a one-trick pony don't know what you're talking about. well, I don't know what I'm talking about because the Bank of England is a one-trick pony on that. It's got control over interest rates.
And one thing,
That's so that's the only kind of remedy that they have for inflation. You put interest rates up, people have got less money in their pocket. If you've got less money in your pocket because your mortgage is high, you've got less money to spend. If you've got less money to spend, the shopkeeper gets less of your money and he has to bring the prices down. In very simplistic terms, that's the way inflation works.
Is it to force it into a recession? No, I mean, I'm no expert.
Well, the problem that I see this time round is that I personally don't think you have inflation caused by people spending too much. I don't think you have an economy overheating. Mm-hmm. In actual fact, I think you've almost got the exact opposite. We've been teetering on the edge of recession for, months and months and months. We've got out of being, in a recession on technicalities on 0.1% of figures coming through. But it just seems to me that, what is causing inflation just now? Supply chain problems caused by the pandemic. Mm-hmm. Oil and gas prices going up caused by Ukraine. Before that, the oil and gas prices were going up caused by the pandemic and supply chain issues. And
one of the big arguments was that I've heard a lot of people talk about is that, a lot of it is blamed for the short-term stuff that's just happened in the last couple of years, supply chain issues, loss of workforce through Brexit and all the rest of it. But a lot of people really zooming out on the whole thing and going right back to post-financial crash when basically we started pumping in so much money into the economy, QE basically.
Yep.
And that is now caught up with us.
Well, it's caught up with us, but
Free
also,
money.
You mentioned the Brexit word. On that article you're talking about, I don't think it really spent much time on the Brexit issue, but it's massive. The currency against the dollar's down 20% since the Brexit vote. It's down 20% against the euro. And we import, I can't remember exactly what the figures are, but I think we import 200 billion more than we export, which now costs us 20% more than it used to. Add on top of that tariffs for stuff coming in that never used to be paid. Prices are going up. Joe Public's got no control over that. Joe Public has to pay that stuff. He has to buy the food. He has to put the fuel in his car. So we put interest rates up and people have got less money to spend. So what do? Do they not eat? Do they not travel to their work? We could go on the train, but the train's in strike.
Are you having conversations with people at the moment, like people that are genuinely struggling? And I know not in your circle, because obviously the elite that you hang around with, do you know what I mean?
Cigars.
Yes, but it's the bottom end. The bottom end is obviously massively more affected than the top end. You will be able to afford to pay your energy bills, and your savings might suffer. At the bottom end,
well, from a business point of view, because at the sharp end of your estate agency stroke auction, you'll see what's coming through and the clients.
That's exactly right. I see it on a daily basis because of the job that I do. If I wasn't doing that job, would I see it? No.
Completely hidden, yeah.
Where do you stand on, this whole idea that, because I think it was actually the governor of the Bank of England, right, Andrew Bailey, who's getting some amount of flack at the moment because he's basically been caught, asleep at the wheel, because part of the argument is, and again, it's great to look back on it, isn't it? In hindsight, it's a wonderful thing. They should have put interest rates up higher,
sooner,
faster, sooner. You look at over across in America where apparently they've got it a bit more under control. But he said right at the start, for companies not to offer wage rises, if people start getting higher wages, then the whole thing spirals out of control. So where do you sit on that? Because obviously there was a chat as well in the papers the other day about, I think Rishi Sunak came out and said that they were going to oppose public sector wage increases as well, which I'm sure is going to go down well, and that'll win them the next election, won't it? So, is that the wage rise a real problem as well? Because obviously, just like you said, if you narrow it down to basic fundamentals, effectively you are fueling the inflation because you're putting more money in people's pockets. When we're really trying, like you said at the start, Stephen, we really could do a recession.
We're trying to curb
Just
it.
to kind of, like, reset. Do you know what I mean?
Surely, if interests are through the roof, there's less amount of borrowing, there's less amount of business spend, there's less amount of growth, investment. Is that the whole point? Is ramming up the interest rates that quickly that it forces into a recession?
I'm not 100% sure. I'm not an expert on economics, but inflation obviously diminishes your debt, and the debt that we have is astronomical compared to what it used to be. I remember doing a speech somewhere years and years ago, and it was I think now, when Gordon Brown left office, the national debt that he had between him and Tony Blair had risen more than every national debt of every single Prime Minister, all the way back to Sir Robert Walpole in 17 whatever. Cumulatively, that's how much we increased our debt in the space of 3 years with the financial crash. And since then, we've just put more and more and more into it. So
keep the tap on. No.
Yeah, so the debt levels now, from a country point of view, are astronomical.
Well, if you look at that, internationally, we're not really performing very well in terms of
no shit.
in terms of comparing ourselves to the Eurozone,
but
America.
Politically, we've just been an absolute shambles.
Turmoil for a few years.
I don't have. I've got a political interest, but I don't have a political interest in any particular party. But it seems to me like the whole Brexit thing was a manufactured thing to get Boris Johnson elected. Boris Johnson looked at that and said, if I go pro-Brexit or I go pro-Remain, what one gives me the best opportunity to become Prime Minister? There was no thought process there whatsoever as to what is best for the country. Now, what happens with people is we entrench ourselves into teams and then we refuse to change our position. But in actual fact, we're right and wrong all the time. We'll be right today, wrong tomorrow. You change your position constantly due to the information that's coming at you. But when you look at things like Brexit, for instance, or Scottish independence, another one, how it divides people into teams, and then we're not going to change no matter what, pro-Boris, anti-Boris kind of thing. I wrote this thing one time in a song, and it was, we did a chant in a song, and a team to belong, and a team we can blame that play the same fucking game. It really is. It's the Rangers-Celtic thing. Two identical people. Hate you, you hate me kind of thing. We do, everything identically in our lives. And I don't understand it. I don't understand why we can't look at it just now, regardless of what way we voted on the Brexit vote, and say, this shit's not working. It's created all sorts of turmoil because it created this division in the country. The Labour Party don't want to speak about it. The Labour Party should right now be saying, this is a shit show, guys, and we need to reverse course on this. Or we need to get to... Remember when the vote happened at first? Kind of everybody thought you would get some kind of soft Brexit was the term at the time. Nobody thought we were going to get the WTO terms thing, clean break, because it was madness. But that's what we've got, and that's what we've accepted now. And we wonder why our prices are going up. We wonder why our economy's not going well compared to the rest of the EU countries. Now, I don't know what way you guys voted in the Brexit referendum. It's irrelevant what way any of us voted in the Brexit referendum. But where are we right now? What has been the proof in the pudding? Do we actually want to look at it and actually want to look at results, or we just want to sing our song and kind of throw out our chant? It's a really strange.
Without going down a political rabbit hole there, David, because it was good to get your thoughts on that. But bringing it back to the economy and obviously property and our property investor audience. So, like, moving on from inflation, obviously that affects interest rates. Like we said, interest rates are on the rise. People predicted, some of the economists that you read, they predicted that the bank rate was going to peak at 4.5%. Now, because of this latest set of data, we're now back to October 2022 with the Trustonomics, when things shot right up.
That's the point where things really changed.
Aye.
That's the point where I really felt it on the ground.
So so things were looking better. So things can't, obviously they got rid of Liz Truss, they got rid of the Kwasi Kwarteng or whatever his name was, who was a complete disaster as well. And then they got Jeremy Hunt and Richie to step in, and then things kind of calmed down. The markets calmed down a wee bit. Things were actually looking better there up until, April. Interest rates, mortgage interest rates were coming down a little bit. Things were settling down. Things were looking good. Obviously, this latest set of data has spooked the markets again. The bonds, the UK gilts yields have shot up, which affects obviously the borrowing and long-term fixed rates as well. Without going into too much technical data, because I'm learning about all this stuff as well, but they call them the SONIA swap rates, or what the mortgage lenders base the long-term fixed rates off of. They've shot up. So now all the lenders have basically had to pull all the products away that were sitting at like 4.5% fixes. All the economists are saying the Bank of England base rate has now got to go up to 6%. They're predicting 6% is going to be the peak to get a handle on this inflation. Obviously, the mortgage lenders are now repricing all their products.
Yeah, but that's the bit that I'm not sure of. But putting your interest rates up to 6%, how does that get a handle on inflation? How does that solve your supply chain issues? How does it solve? Oil and gas prices might come down. I don't know.
Surely just squeezes everyone's pockets even more. I think mine is on a fixed rate of 1.4%. So in a few years' time, when my fixed rate ends, where's it going to be at? 7%, 8%? That's going to squeeze.
Well, if you look at the property market, volumes are down. If volumes are down, people aren't moving home. If they're not moving home, they're not buying the kitchen, they're not putting the bathroom in, they're not buying the new car with the proceeds of all that money is lost to the economy. So where is this overspend happening? I don't see people being frivolous with money. I don't see folk running about the streets just throwing it away on Louis Vuitton. I don't understand it.
I think businesses have got to fail, basically. And then I think you've got unemployment needs to go up, because the labour market's so tight at the moment. If you're looking for a job just now, you go on one of the job sites, vacancies that are all-time high. There's so much choice out there. Employers are having to raise their salaries, raise their wages. So I think there does need to be some pain. I don't think, like you say, interest rates are going to have to take a while to filter through as well.
I don't think there has to be some pain. I think there will be some pain, because that's the way it works. The lower down the food chain you are, the more they're going to demand from you. You know, the market for super yachts is probably quite healthy right now. And that's the kind of crazy part of it. If you look at the way that the wealth has been distributed, rich people have got richer, as poorer people are taking the brunt of the energy crisis and whatnot. These bills mean nothing. And I'm not meaning let's, burn the mansions and take the money off of people kind of thing, but it's just a fact of life.
Yeah. That gap's going to widen.
Yeah,
it's like the eradication of player middle class will become squeezed to the bottom of the rung, and the bottom of the rung is going to really, really struggle.
And you asked me earlier on, do I see this in my daily life? Yes, I see it in my working life, but I wouldn't see it in my circle of friends, because we tend to be, have people round about us on similar
salaries or incomes.
Exactly. And what happens now is that portion of people, which is relatively small in terms of the full marketplace, is getting bigger. So that'll get bigger. It used to be called like the underclass, if you like. These people didn't vote and everything, so nobody really cared about them in political terms. Now they do vote. They voted for Boris Johnson. They voted for Donald Trump. They voted for Nigel Farage. They were motivated that way. But that group is going to get larger and larger, and there will come a point where politically it will matter.
It's Nicola Sturgeon, freezing rents, banning evictions, because there's a bigger voter demographics that are actually in rented accommodation than actually a landlord. So
exactly,
we can piss that party off because they're not a big voting population, but the tenants are. Yeah,
but as to property and what happens in prices there, which I guess is going to be one of your questions at
coming to that
some point.
My internet signal's just dropped out, so I've lost all my news articles.
Your source information going in into
my news articles
your brain now.
Off here.
I want to give us some facts and figures now.
Basically, what I was getting onto was obviously this mortgage ticking time bomb that we read about in the press. So the headlines are, this could be 10 times worse than the energy crisis. All these people that are on fixed rate mortgages coming to an end this year. Like you just said yourself.
But something similar to what David just touched on as well. I read an article recently where they're saying that as much as the fixed terms were coming to an end, the loan to value is a hell of a lot lower than it used to be. Apparently the average...
That's absolutely right. Yeah,
I think the average refinance was saying was something like 50% loan to value. So they're not highly leveraged.
No.
Not only that, but it was interesting reading a stat. You would be surprised at how many people have actually got mortgages. You know, a lot less than what I thought. So I think it was like something like 30%... 30% of homeowners' population got mortgages. That's what I was actually looking up when my internet signals
one of these ones. It's difficult for that number to go up because as house prices have gone up, it's difficult for people to get on the ladder. To start with, once you're on the ladder, you've got a mortgage for, the next 25 years or 30 years or whatever. But you're absolutely right. The loan to value is massively lower than it was pre-2007, 2008 crash, because at that time it was 100% interest-only mortgages that were getting thrown at everybody left, right and centre. 120% mortgages were getting thrown out.
I can't believe what you're saying on that as well. It will be the lower, the have-nots that are going to really, really suffer. And even when I say that, maybe the people that were starting off on the property ladder the last 3 or 4 years, maybe the mid to early 30s, get on the property ladder at a 200, 300 grand house, a 1.8% mortgage, that term will be coming to an end soon. These are the ones that will struggle. They've tried to go on the market. They're squeezed with energy prices, and now their mortgage is going to double or times by 3.
It's a middle class issue. It's not the people that are scraping about the bottom. It's a middle class, because if you look, even looking around my neighbourhood, you've got 2 cars in the driveway, BMWs, Audis, whatever, highly financed up to the hills. They bought their house 5 years ago when they could fix in a rate of 1.6%. Now they're going to have to...
That's another thing as well.
Scale down to 1 car.
Yeah, or will they?
But this is the thing that as a country and as an economy, we've encouraged everybody to spend everything they earn. So they might have a loan to value ratio that's lower than it used to be, but they've got the PCP deal on the car, and they've got the catalogue terms on everything. And it's a kind of crazy situation now that if you look at the amount of Range Rover Vogues that are kicking about, I mean, I don't know if we spoke about this before, did we? But I mean, what is a Range Rover Vogue now? 140 grand. There's millions of them. It's like a new Cortina. And who's got 140 grand sitting about to buy that car? Next to nobody.
But £1,000 a month or £1,400 a month.
Exactly, gets you the image that you want to have.
Yeah.
And I was in car showroom not that long ago. And I can't remember exactly the number, so I'm going to wing it. But I remember saying to the salesman guy, how much is that Range Rover? And he said, that one there's 150 grand. And I said, what's it worth at 3-year-old? He said, I don't know. I said, well, what's a 3-year-old Range Rover worth just 50. Now? But I say 50 grand. So you're looking at that dropping £100,000 in that 3-year period. I said, what does it cost to PCP it? And it said it was 1,500 quid a month. So 1,500 quid a month was 18 grand a year, times it by 3 years, £54,000. So it's costing you £54,000 to PCP it, and on the face of it, it's costing you £100,000 to buy it cash. So even if you didn't need the finance, you need the finance. Because the person selling the vehicle on it 3 years old needs to be the car garage, because they're the ones that can put the finance package on it and sell on. If you're trying to sell that car through the auto trader to somebody who's got 80, 90, £100,000 in cash, you're not going to find them.
No.
So everybody's looked at, even if you've got money, you need finance. It's a kind of crazy world that I struggle to get my head round about.
I'm the same as Stephen, actually. I'm going to throw this in because my deal ends in spring next year to 2024. So the stat is that in 2024, 1.6 million will need to move their fixed rate off on a new product. So that I'm one of the 1.6 million. So my mortgage costs are going to go from £800 a month up to, I think it was 1,350 or something like that. So it's quite a big jump. I mean, I'll get through it.
Yeah,
I'll always find a way.
But if you have someone that's just started out that's maybe pushed themselves to afford that house, but everything else is getting squeezed, your fuel in the car, your cost energy prices to heat and
that's the
your
thing,
house,
it's coming from all angles.
And then your mortgage rate gets hit. you know, that doesn't sound like a massive jump, but if you've been hit from all angles before that, and then that's a massive jump, surely that's got to be the straw that breaks the
You've
camel's
also
back.
educated your population that these are the things that I'm supposed to have. I'm supposed to have the new car, the new Audi. Yeah. I'm supposed to have the holiday abroad. You start taking these things, all very well to say, you know, back in the year 1990 kind of thing, we didn't have that kind of stuff and it never did us any harm. But that's not the world that we live in now. We've encouraged people to spend everything so as we can grow an economy.
Yeah, or buy what they can't afford.
Yeah, but what it does is it puts everybody into a fragile state. They'll have 2 paychecks from disaster. And that's the majority of the population now. So when things go up £200 and £300, it does make a massive difference.
And the government have said, obviously, you know, because there was other political parties calling for, you know, like government should step in and save people. And
never going to happen.
Mortgage holidays and all the rest of it. I just don't think that's basically fueling the whole inflation. That's what we got ourselves into this mess in the start.
Yeah, printing the
so
free money.
It was good to see that they've actually kind of said no. They're doing a few things. They're basically talking to the banks and saying, right, allow people to go into interest only, so it knocks down their payments for a while.
Or take it to 35-year terms. Or
stop repossessions for a year or something like that. So they are doing a few things, but I think the banks already had that option in place anyway if you went and spoke to them.
I don't think these announcements said anything.
No.
I think everything they said was already there. I think it was just
exactly
political sound bites.
Right, moving on, because obviously we've got a few other things to talk about. House prices, right? Always love bringing up house prices because I love it just for the figures for Aberdeen, because when everybody else in the country's going up, Aberdeen's going down. That's where Stephen invests. So I'll let you stick
the mind is touch in reverse.
So I'll read out the headline stats, right? And these are stats taken from the land registry, right? So you would know, David, look, you know, reading the newspapers and all that, you always get these headlines, house prices going up, house prices going down, but they're all taken from different places. So you've got Halifax, you've got Nationwide, Rightmove. Rightmove's the classic. They were going up and up, up, kept going up, but Rightmove's data is basically from estate agents that are basically going out and putting a price in the house, asking prices, not sold prices.
Yep.
Right, so sold prices. Sold prices on the
for nothing.
So we're up. So average price of property in Scotland is 187,150. Annual price change of a property in Scotland was 2%. Still going up. Monthly price change of a property in Scotland is 1.3%. Right, so I know these figures don't really mean anything, because at the end of the day, there's such a lag in the price getting registered on the land registry.
Well, yeah, I'm not looking at figures that you're looking at there just now, but I'll guarantee you that if you look at it in Monopoly Board terminology, the closer you are to the dark blue bit, the Monopoly Board, the larger the price increases will have been, which is back to what we were talking about before. The wealthier end is doing better than, you know, so Edinburgh will be doing better than Irvine.
Aye. So if I bring up the table here, this is what Stephen wanted to bring up, right? So he had a wee look at it and he was quite happy, because there's other places that
he's nailed it there. Yep.
Other places biggest, that are worse than this.
The biggest increase is Edinburgh. Yeah.
Aye. So Edinburgh, where we here on the chart here?
Just load in 17.2% increase.
Aye, these stats seem. I mean, City of Glasgow, right?
Interesting enough, I am seeing a few negatives, Nick. Usually you pull up the negatives, but there's a negative at Clackmannanshire.
We can't really take that into account, because the data in Clackmannanshire is taken into account about 10 sales or something like that. Do you know what I mean?
So Ayrshire's down 0.5%. Yep, so we're getting a few negatives now coming here.
City of Aberdeen still down 7%, negative 7%. Right. Anyway, so what we're looking at here, we want to know, Davy, what you're seeing when you're going out and putting houses on the market at the moment. If I look at Rightmove, I'm seeing a lot of reduced prices.
Yeah, absolutely. I noticed it starting to change. Well, it didn't start to change. It literally, the market stopped the weekend the Queen died. Nothing to do with the Queen dying, but that was coincidentally the same time as the Liz Truss budget. Yeah. At that point, I think Joe Public said, "Wait a minute, this is a shit show." They had no idea what it meant. You know, that the markets were tumbling, but they knew that the mortgage companies were withdrawing their products, and they knew something serious was happening. The public just, every so often, there'll be a story that cuts through, and that was it. That was the thing that said to people, this is not all smelling of roses here, because at that point the house prices were shooting up and the market was on fire. So the headlines went, but the volumes were down. And the volumes being down is why the prices went up, because there was more people wanting to buy than people wanting to sell. Most people realised post-pandemic that we had a problem economically. We had a real problem. So I think I'll stay where I am. I'll batten down the hatches and I'll see this through. So that's the property not coming to the market. But the person in the one-bed property that's just had a kid needs to move to the two-bed.
And your repossessions weren't coming on the market as well, because
exactly. Yeah. So that stuff all started to hit at that point. Then what happened was mortgages became more difficult to get because of that budget situation, and all of a sudden the number of buyers matched the number of sellers. So you had a low number of buyers and a low number of sellers, and the prices flatlined essentially. So going forward, and that's where we are just now. Going forward, I don't have a crystal ball, but my job depends. If I'm going to buy somebody's property tomorrow, I can't sell it for 6 months. So I'm predicting what the market's going to be in November. And the truth of the matter is, I've not got a clue. And anybody that tells you that they know what's going to happen is telling you lies. I mean, we can look at it and say, is the mortgage situation going to get easier? I don't think so, because rates are going to continue to go up for the...
I think the amount of exposure that this is getting as well, that obviously feeds through into public sentiment and expectations.
Yeah, but follow that, just before I come on to that, follow that train of thought through. Mortgages don't become easier to get. In fact, they become more difficult. So the number of buyers stays static or goes down the way. Are people going to be motivated to sell? I don't think so, because the economic situation that we're in is still a shit show and is going to be for the foreseeable future. So more properties, well, you could also argue more properties going to come on the market because people get into financial difficulty
and want to downsize and reduce their mortgage amount.
So if that happens, more properties come on the market. If the number of buyers don't go up, then prices go down. So on balance, is it more likely that prices head south than north? Probably, but not certainly. I think the time of them rising through the roof is finished.
Yeah,
I feel like it's flatlining at the moment.
Yeah.
I don't know. I just feel like...
Yeah, I think the negative ones we'll see won't really be negative. So it'll be instead of paying well over the asking,
it varies from area to area. If you happen to have something in Moss Park just now, it'll go through the roof.
Aye.
If you happen to have something in East Kilbride, it'll sit there.
And a lot of it is like, I've speaking to agents as well, they're saying that, like, your 4 or 5 bedroom detached at like 400 grand and that, they're saying they're struggling a wee bit to sell. Whereas your first time buyers and your kind of flats in Pollock Shields and Shawlands and West End and all that, they're still going well, because if you look at it, first time buyers...
They're the better areas. Your East Lothian, you mentioned there, these tend to be the areas where you've got parental support, where you've got independent wealth, you've got
the bank of mum and dad,
exactly,
still the main lender.
You take the bank of mum and dad away and people have actually got to save their deposits. That's why places like East Kilbride struggle, or Cumbernauld struggles, or Wishaw struggles.
Even the market, the one you hit on the nail on the head there, Nick, with the 400 grand houses in your estate's probably knocking back to what they were saying about the middle class. It'll be the middle class that'll get affected. They're going, do you know what? I'm waiting, I'm not buying, I'm not moving,
Then it's affordability. It's an affordability issue, isn't it? Because you look at, obviously, with rates, how that can impact. If they're taking out if they're looking at a 90% loan to value,
I take that back to buy-to-let mortgages as well. The stress test on a buy-to-let mortgage, and a 7.5% mortgage, 125% of the mortgage payment, struggling to kind of get these to stack up, which will it stop investors buying the lower stock that you were mentioning there as well, like the 1 and 2 bed flats? I'm having an effect on it.
I don't know, but obviously there's knock-ons into the rental sector, which I guess you're going to come on to.
We'll talk about that as well later. But I mean, it'll be interesting to see. I mean, there was attempts. The last market update we did, the Skipton Building Society had brought in a 100% mortgage. I don't know if you saw this one. So no deposit required. But reading
Did they pull that? Or did they,
no, so I don't think there's been much uptake. So it was specifically targeted to renters, right? So you had to have a track record of 12 months renting. You had to provide your landlord's statements and all that, your rental statements, and have a squeaky clean credit rating and all the rest of it. But I have looked on some mortgage brokers on YouTube and all that. They've said there's hardly been any that have been issued. So I think it was a bit of a PR stunt, to be honest with you. Do you know what I mean? So, but always interesting to see how things are playing out at a local level. But like you say, very much a kind of geographic, each area is different.
My experiences of it just now, my honest experiences, I'm as quiet as I've ever been on the estate agency side.
That's because you're not putting out as many radio ads, Davy.
I'm putting out exactly the same number of radio ads. We advertise through these things. The other side of our business where we buy properties, that's completely normal. That's doing as it always did.
Right.
And that tends to be because somebody's got like a mental health issue, or relative's a hoarder, or the place is a bomb site kind of thing. It's basically trade sales. So that's constant as it always was. The estate agency side is half, not even what it was.
Don't worry. Now that you've been on the Scottish Property Podcast, we've given you the exposure. Sales will go booming now.
It kind of comes back to what you were saying, though. If there's no stock in the market,
well, we struggle a little bit in there as well, because I would like to think we're a little bit more expert at what we do than the standard high street estate agency, because typically the people that we're dealing with have specific problems that
you solve,
that we're able to solve in a way that maybe your typical high street brands don't. They're point and press. Yeah, they're very good at what they do, but but what happens when the markets seem to be flying is I'm not going to pay extra for David to do it if I can get
a high street bank can do just the same job. But
there's an advert that says I'll do it for 36 quid, including the home report kind of thing. We'll go with them. So we struggle a bit more than most on that. But as I say, we're less than half of where we were on the estate agency side.
Is that going to have a pivot point, do you think, going off topic a little bit, that if the high street banks don't or can't provide that service, to then come to the likes of you because they're looking, well, this is sat on the market for a couple of months now, we need a solution, we need a sale? I
think that's the kind of things that we tend to pick up. The kind of estate agency salesman goes in and promises the earth, and then 3 months down the line it's not developed, and then they say, do you know what, Davey told me the truth at the start.
Before we leave this discussion on house prices and all that, there was a wee stat out an article that I wanted to share with the listeners, because I think this is important, because I go to a lot of property networking events and all that, and people say that I'm quite optimistic and all that. And I know I get classed as negative Nick here on the podcast, right? Negativity Nick. But people say to me, oh, we've been here before, think back to the 1990s when we had interest rates at 14% and all that. It'll all be fine. But pulling out a wee stat here, for comparing the 1990s to current day, right? The average property price, UK house price in 1990 was 57,726, and the average UK household income was 20,448. Fast forward to present day, the average UK house price is 237,834, and the average UK household income is 37,100. So you see the problem there, affordability.
So you've got like 3 times your salary against 8 times your salary.
So it used to be like exactly 3 times versus now 9 times. So it's not quite. No, it's can't really compare to the 90s.
They're different worlds.
So anybody's telling you that?
Well, lots of people, these property kind of events will tell you that everything's going to be great because their incomes are dependent on it. That's what I want to see. And the same person that's telling you, how it was in the 1990s, they're about 26-year-old.
Yeah, we actually did come out with that line right about 18 months ago. We were like, no, so interest rates were at 14%, I'll be fine. But now looking into it, no, it's not quite comparable. Moving on to rents, Davey, right? So as a letting agent myself, I'm very interested in this, and it's basically to bring up the stats here, which are produced by Zoopla, which are quite interesting.
Here's going to be the flip side of the coin. I'm assuming we're going to see huge rent rises.
Right, so these are the stats here.
Seen them.
What's
Aberdeen, Nick?
So actually, Aberdeen are doing well.
Of course they are.
Aberdeen are doing well on rents. They're doing shit on property prices, but they're doing well on rents.
I believe Aberdeen and Dundee are some of the highest in the UK.
Well, out of 15 cities, right, and that's over the whole of the UK, Aberdeen's actually at number 5, and it's up 10.6%, and it's over the 12 months. Average rent 652. The only ones that are above Aberdeen are Southampton, Glasgow. So get it up, yeah.
This is what I meant by the teams thing. So guys.
Manchester and Edinburgh. Edinburgh is top, 13.7%. Rents are up. So it just shows you that.
Was there a lot of cities in Scotland in the UK top 5 there?
Well, this is it. Like, out of the top 5, this just shows you.
I'm stealing his thunder here by looking up at the screen.
The Scottish government, who have put a cap on rents, who have basically stepped in saying, oh yes, Nicola Sturgeon last year in September stepped up. We'll save the renters. We'll put a cap on rents. There'll be a rent freeze in Scotland. Guess what's happened? Out of the top 5 cities of highest rent increases in the UK, 3 of them are in Scotland. And, we're now at a point where we're rising above London pretty much. So that shows you how bullshit that policy has been and how it's not working.
I mean, I'm not a rental expert like you are, but tell me how that works. The renter's protected unless the renter leaves, and then the rent.
So the idea is security of tenure, basically, and for them to protect people financially. So it was an emergency bill that they put through
because of COVID.
Because of COVID, that was it. But they kept extending it. So now COVID's behind us, but they keep on extending it.
Yeah.
They've had it for 6 months. Now they've extended it twice, I think. So now it's through till April 2024. Initially, it was a 0% cap, so landlords weren't allowed to increase at all on existing tenancies, right? Mm-hmm. Fair enough. Okay, people were going through hard times, understandable. But now they keep extending it because they're trying to come in. They're trying to, in the background, they're trying to devise a plan for long-term rent controls, which they will eventually bring in. But they keep buying time with this. We'll just extend it. Extend it. So now what they've done is they've increased it. You're now allowed as a landlord to increase your rent by 3% for existing tenancies. But if you buy a property tomorrow and you put it on the rental market, you can put it on for whatever you want, which is what's happening. So these stats are for newly listed properties.
Yeah.
So when we say rents are up 13%, obviously you can't put your rents up 13% with existing tenants.
So effectively you could have 2 properties next door to each other identically renting for £1,000 and £500.
Yeah.
Yes.
It's pretty
which is why the argument goes that a lot of landlords are selling up. I'd argue that not droves and droves of landlords are selling up here in Scotland. I don't think
they're selling up. I think they've been selling a property.
Yeah.
Because the capital gains tax allowances were disappearing.
Yeah. Probably just reshuffling their portfolio. Or...
Yeah. For those people that don't know, the capital gains tax allowances ran at 13 grand a year, 13.5 grand a year. So if you and your partner bought a property in 2 days, effectively you could make £27,000 off that rental property before you pay any tax. And what people were doing was they would have a portfolio of maybe 5 properties, bought one a year over 5 years. When property 1 got to 5 years old, it was sold, it made us £27,000 tax-free money, and it was replaced with another one on the conveyor belt. So effectively you had a property selling every single year, giving you 27 grand a year tax-free. Then the government pulled that last year. They halved it down. This year they're halving it down again. It will just disappear. So there was a scramble last year for landlords to sell a property to get the £27,000 that maybe they weren't scheduled to sell. So they went on the market, and historically that property would have been bought by another landlord. But the other landlord has now been put off buying that property because of the 6% second property tax. So you've got properties getting lost to the rental market there, because if your property portfolio average size is, you'll know better than me, but let's say it's 5, and one of them was getting sold off last year, and one of them's getting sold off this year, effectively 20% of your rental stock's disappearing in theory.
Increased rents.
Exactly.
Supply and demand, as we always like to bring it back to. It's the basic stuff, supply and demand.
But it's typical of government modern government now, and they bring in the 6% second property tax at the same time as they do away with the capital gains tax allowance. You can't do
both each end,
everything at once, you know. And I mean, don't get me wrong. I don't think it's a wrong thing for them to remove the capital gains tax allowances, because they should never have been there in the first place. Nobody with an entrepreneurial bent ever looked at something and said, that's a good idea because of capital gains tax allowances. You do it because it's going to make money. Capital gains tax allowances are just a benefit, a bonus. And the exception to that was the property market, and then specifically the rental market, because you could work that conveyor belt system on that 27 grand a year thing. So you were actively saying, I'm going to buy a property next year because of the capital gains allowances. That doesn't really appear in any other sector. I don't think, anyway.
Yeah. So no, it's just, I mean, for me, I'm very passionate about this, and I think it's another failed policy by the Scottish Government.
Yeah.
And it's been not thought through. They've not consulted the right people. They just went ahead and did it for a headline.
Yeah.
And it's backfired.
Well, the Scottish Government as well has ramped up a level from the UK government. I think we're on 6% second property tax. I can't remember what the UK is on, but it's like 3%.
3%.
Yeah, so we're double there. And I guess you touched on it earlier. Why is that? It's the demographic of who votes for that particular party. Landlord, not so much.
Exactly. Who's ever going to have any sympathy for landlords at the end of the day? And it's not going to win them votes. Moving on to our last story, because we're running out of time, and it's about short-term lets. So this is to do with Airbnbs. Now, the Scottish Government introduced a new legislation to give local councils the power to licence the sector. So now you need to have a licence, like an HMO licence, basically, to operate an Airbnb short-term let. And in Edinburgh Council said that they were going to ban short-term lets in all the tenement flats, shared closes. Obviously, the reasoning behind it was that it created neighbours were complaining, basically. It created a shortage of housing as well, because everyone was converting them to Airbnbs and all the rest of it. So a group of Airbnb accommodation providers, holiday lets, whatever you want to call them, they got together and they raised money through a crowdfunding platform. It was £300,000, and they took it to the court. I think it's called the Court of Session, and they won their case. Actually, they won the case, and the judge said that it was unlawful for Edinburgh City Council to basically ban these, but it was the Scottish Government who brought in the policy again, who distributed the power to local authorities. And now this has happened. There's not really been any further forward with what's going to happen now.
It's reaction policy, isn't it? That the rents are jumping up. People are selling off rental properties. Rental properties are getting lost to Airbnb. What can we do to... It's like finger in a dike policy kind of thing.
Constant knee-jerk reactions to stuff as well.
And nobody thought just to suggest building more houses, did they?
I think it's been suggested, I think.
No, I was kidding on. Do you know what I mean? That would be the easiest resolution to it.
Well, but then this is the problem. If you go back to Maggie Thatcher selling off the council houses, people got wealthy.
Yeah. Nobody can. You'll see a lot of that with some of the stock that you deal with. You know, obviously people complain about there being a shortage of social housing, but they're not complaining when they bought their council house for 10 grand. They're selling it for 80.
They're not, but the people don't see the big picture. They don't see that when you buy your council house and you make the money and you move area more regularly, you might get the things, you might get the car, you might get the new kitchen, you might get the holiday, but you lose the neighbourhood, you lose the society. You lose the Bobby on the beat. You lose the older people kind of looking after younger people. You lose the younger people kind of getting the messages for the older people. It's back to the tenement culture that we've spoken about before.
There is that argument for sure.
You lose all of that. And, you know, I think we're heading now towards, back to the rich get richer type thing. You're heading to a point where the good areas will get better and the worse areas won't. And you'll end up putting a big fence around the good areas so the bad areas can't get in type thing. It's that two-tier society that we're probably already in.
So for anybody operating the serviced accommodation stroke holiday lets and all that, this is going to be a very interesting time, because the licensing you had to have in, all local authorities said you had to have your license applied for by October the 1st.
Yeah.
So because this has happened now, it'll be interesting to see how the government come back on this and where this goes and how other councils will deal with it. In Glasgow, for example, if you've got a flat in Glasgow, you need to apply for planning permission to get a change of use.
Yeah.
And that's going to be very difficult. So
They're already stretched enough as it is.
But again, it's like, do the councils really want this, or is it being imposed by the government again for vote winning because of this housing shortage, right? Because think about Glasgow City Council wants the city to compete for world stage events, COP26, Commonwealth Games.
So it needs Airbnbs.
How many people came to Glasgow and stayed in Airbnbs, and they like staying in that sort of accommodation? There's a need for it, you know. So
I think there's a real problem. You know, we've touched on the UK government, we've touched on the Trump style of politics, we've touched on the Scottish government. There is a real inadequacy in politics. The people who run the show now, and I've met the Theresa Mays and David Camerons, and they're not impressive. You think you'll meet these people and you'll get all tongue-tied and nervous and everything. They are not spectacular people. And I suppose your governments now are middle management, really. For your government now is effectively what the council used to be. Corporations run the country now. Is that ever coming back? I don't mean, see, for instance, I know I'm going to look away in a tangent, but if you look at the stuff that's going on just now with the artificial intelligence stuff and how quickly that's coming in, nobody can control it. It's the Wild West out there. No government can control that, because the government cannot control the corporation that's inventing the stuff, that's marketing the stuff.
Getting free rein for it.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it's, you know, like, almost blaming governments now is almost a waste of breath, because they're almost irrelevant.
But what disappoints me is when they come out with these policies and they don't consult the people that actually know. It's the same in business. You know, they had the Green Party, Lorna Slater came out with that bottle return scheme, where you take your and it's failed.
Yeah.
Because they didn't speak to the businesses, the business people who have got to implement it, who have got to make all the systems and the production lines for it to work.
Yeah.
They just came out and said, "Oh, this is going to look amazing. Roll this out."
But it's all
Deal
down
with
to the headline. You know, it's like,
Is that a positive story? Is it a negative story? And how does it affect our voting demographics for getting us re-elected?
Look at the likes of Boris Johnson and Donald Trump, like, used the headline. You know, like, you get accused of something, so you throw out something that gets a different headline, and the narrative moves to that. Then you throw out something else, and you just keep kicking the can down the road. And the news cycle now is, you know, 2 days worth. Like, when you're talking there about the rent caps and whatnot, who's interested? There's no political journalism there. There's, you know, if you look at the report that came out recently about the amount of money that was lost to fraud during the pandemic, I don't know if you saw that, like £30 billion effectively went missing.
Bounce back loans and all that?
No, this was money given out, contracts for PPE.
Oh, contracts,
all
PPE and all the rest of it. Yeah.
And where did that money go? But they release it on the day that Prince Harry goes to court, because the public's more interested in Prince Harry than they are in, you know, billions doesn't mean anything to people. It's too big. It's like the little girl in the red coat thing in Schindler's List. 6 million people's too much. Reduce it down to the one little girl in the red coat. Boom, there's a punch in the gut. So I don't know how we change that, because the way we report news now is entertainment. It's an entertainment show based on volume of viewers, and it should
clickbait.
A prime example of that would be the submarine.
Exactly. Yeah.
So that took over. That was massive, which took over all the other world events, including pretty much Russia.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean?
It's bizarre, but I can understand how it happens. But you're never going to get regulation in it, because the corporation that runs that's bigger than the government. You know, it's a really.
I just think the housing issue, like you said, who actually cares? But I think housing is becoming a big.
No, but people do care. But we need to tell them to care. You need to report the news story. You need to put it to people in such a way that they can absorb it and understand what's happening. it's a story that you know about, that I know about a bit.
Yeah.
And the two lads sitting over here don't know about at all. Joe Public.
They'll know about it when their mortgage rates come to an end and their prices
And they
go
have to go right.
Like you say, that's it. That you do it in quite sizable pieces that people can understand and relate to, rather than
Right.
big fucking number.
Yeah.
Brilliant, Davey. I've really enjoyed the chat. It's been great having you on. Hope you'll come back again.
Anytime,
soon.
boys. Any boys.
And you've got some tan on you, by the way. And you're recovering from your shoulder
I
operation.
got a new shoulder, so I couldn't drive. So I've been sitting out in my back garden with my chickens.
Because of the cost of eggs.
Do you know, and I've got this, what would you call this, dungarees on today. I've been wearing them for a wee while, and I walked past the mirror the other day, and I used to wear them all the time, and I always thought I looked like kind of Dexy's Midnight Runners. And I walked past the mirror the other day, and Grandpa Walton was looking back at me. It was the strangest thing.
That's what the sun does to you, mate. Good stuff. We'll wrap it up there, guys.
Thanks for having me.
Thanks a lot, Davey. Appreciate that. Cheers.